Okay, this is our final one for tonight. We're going to look at a statement nested inside of a loop. I said earlier that when you see this situation, you always build the outer construct first. Notice that I have an if else inside of a while, but I could also have a loop inside of the if, inside of the consequence. So whatever the major outer structure is, let's build it first. So our first attempt at this is really going to ignore all of this. We're going to ignore all these lines here. And instead we're going to make sure we have a loop that will read and keep reading as long as the number is greater than 0. That's all we care about. If that loop works, we can insert within the structure the if-else statement. So let's make sure this is working. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of get out of here. Now we're going to look at the code. We're going to look at the code carefully. So we're reading and make it a little closer. We're comparing and we're going to the end of the loop and we're writing. We're not even going to write yet. We're just going to read again. And the read is at the bottom of the loop. We're leaving space because we're going to fill in other things later. And this is at the bottom of the loop when we go back. Let's make sure this works. Again, do the outer structure first. I think I have shown you how to do all the basic structures. So let's see if this works. So what's the code going to do? It's going to say keep reading as long as the number is bigger than 0. So we're going to say 4, 2, 1, 0 should stop. So we know that the outer loop is working. Now we can work on the inside part. If the outer loop doesn't work, the in loop, it doesn't matter what's inside. So let's go back in. And now let's do the if construct. Let's lay out the bricks, so to speak. Okay, we're going to say this. I'm going to say here's an if. What's got to come after the if? Someplace there's got to be an else. Right? And there's got to be something that's beyond the if statement. This is like the end of the if. Those are the things. So let's do the if. What's involved? I need to get the value of x and take the mod of it, compare that to 0. So this may be easy. So we're going to say load x. How do we get the mod of it? Mod 2. I think there's an instruction that says mod I equal 2. That does the mod. And now what do we want to do? We want to compare it to 0. We have a compare on equal to 0. We have a variable 0, so we can use that. Okay? And now if it's false, this is a if, we can say we're going to branch on false to else 1. Otherwise, we're going to actually do the consequence. You can almost call this the then. If, then, else. So the then says what? Write x. And after we write else, what do we say we have to do? We have to branch to the end of the whole construct. That's what we said earlier. Branch to end if 1. So this is the alternative, which says what? Print 2 times x. Well, what are we going to do? How do we print 2 times x? Well, we got to load x, right? Notice that printing 2 times x does not change x. Otherwise, you would have tried the double instruction, but that would have messed up x. So we're going to load x and do what else? To double it, we need to do what? Add it to itself. Add the accumulator to x. Oh boy. And we're going to print. How does print work? To print, you print from memory. So therefore, it looks like we need a variable here to hold the answer. So we need to allocate another variable. We don't need 2, we need 3. Let's just call this guy x. Let's call it x2. Okay, and that's double of x. So when we do this, we need to save the result, save it, store it into x2, and now we can print x2. And with that, we are done with the if. And the end if is, I got to put a statement here, so the end of the if coincides with the end of the last statement in the loop. So we're going to branch to the while. Okay? And this is the end of the loop. So this should work. Yeah. See what happens. We're almost done. Now let's try to run this thing. So what we got? So what's the deal? This thing will read as long as the number is greater than 0. If it is even, it'll print the number. Otherwise, it will print twice the number. So let's try it. We're going to enter 4. 4 comes out. We're going to enter 5. What do we expect? To double it, so expect 10. So we're going to enter 0 to stop it. So it looks like what we have here is really doing the trick. What's the moral of the story? If you have a nested structure, always do the outside one. Verify that it works first. If it works, then add the inner ones. Also, if you have an if-else, if you want to, if you feel more comfortable, you could just implement the if and the consequence first. Make sure that works. Then add the else part. The key thing is not to get overwhelmed, and you do that by moving very slowly, one piece at a time. That concludes that for